We have a quota to fill, so let's just get started. For the inside of the skull, it's extremely important that you follow this exact origami procedure to ensure perfect foil density. For this part, I'm going to be using Sculpting. Just roll it out using the pasta maker and let the Sculpting ooze swallow the aluminum foil. After having roughly blocked out the main egg shape of the cranium, I gradually keep adding little lumps of clay to start building out the main masses of the skull, like the shape of the orbit, the zygomatic, and so on. Seeing as this is basically just a normal human skull, this part is kind of just an anatomy exercise, and definitely a nice refresher for someone whose anatomy game has gotten a bit rusty. For the upper teeth, I wanted to try just baking it all in one, so I carved out little grooves for them and added them as soft clay one at a time. As I went along adding stuff to this, the proportions have gotten wildly out of whack, and he's ended up having this long alien-like skull. Now, the Jester does have the back of his skull cracked open to fit that weird meat spine thing, which I can use as an excuse to just start digging that out now. So I figured the jawbone would end up being too thin to keep its shape on its own, so I opted for building it around a wrapped piece of wire. After some poking, carving, adding, and rubbing, it's once again time for teeth. Now, I found the way that I did it last time to be extremely annoying, so this time I decided to do it the old-fashioned way of just poking holes, making and baking a plate full of loose teeth before shoving them into the aforementioned holes with some bacon bond for glue. After baking it in the oven, I yanked the foil out of the back of Jester's skull and quickly realized I'd made a big oopsie. The opening that was left behind by our origami sphere is way too small to fit the stuff that we need to go in there later. After scouring half of Oslo trying to find someone who had that kind of Dremel bit in stock, I could finally drill out the rest and cover my entire kitchen and lungs in clay dust. To have something to attach all the parts we're making to, let's next go on to making what I guess is their torso. Now, the outer walls aren't going to be especially load-bearing, so I'll make them by rolling a thin clay lasagna plate and cutting out 6 squares. 4 for the sides of the box, 1 for the lid, and 1 because I apparently can't count. On the other hand, the bottom of the box is going to be the attachment point for all the walls, the head spine, and the legs, so that is going to have to be pretty chunky. One of the walls is going to be where the arm and the hand crank comes out of. So I start by picking an appropriately sized random tool bit to punch out the armhole. For the crank, I just use an armature wire stump that I wiggle around for a bit to make a slightly above crank width hole. To make sure the whole thing doesn't just break under its own weight, I'm going to make the armature continuous from the top of the spine and through the feet, and then just shove those ends straight into the base. Which means the bottom of the box is going to need a couple of leg holes. One advantage of crappy tools is that you can easily take them apart to make cool new tools. After it's baked, I glue together all the parts of the box. The in-game box has these rounded corners, which I should be able to replicate through some gentle whittle and sanding action. The arm and the crank are made as simply as possible. Well, at least the crank was pretty simple. It's just a tiny bit of wire with a cylinder of clay at the end. The arm starts out that way too, but that changes as I for some reason decide to make him the world's most ripped Jack-in-the-Box. A quick rub down of isopropyl alcohol for maximum glistening, and the arm crank difecta is done. To be able to both carry his huge skull and be able to bend down to nibble on poor working folk, Jack needs a thick, meaty sausage neck. I used my amazingly crafted reference sketch to bend the armature into shape, then splitting the twisted wire at the bottom to make the armatures for the leg. To save a bit of clay and to make baking easier, I'll bulk out the top part with alu foil before starting to wrap the whole thing in clay. I'm using cast clay for this, as I imagine it's going to be bent and waggled around quite a bit, which would definitely crack it if it was made out of Sculpey. Then it's just about adding flappy skin bits and using sculpting tools and ball styluses to give it the required level of surface wobble and meatiness. As I begin adding these thick veins, I start getting this weird feeling of losing the ability to make any money on this project. No, come back. It's not what it looks like. Look, it has legs. To prove my innocence, I'll quickly wrap the legs in thin wire and start blocking out the leg meat. Once again, I seem to have swollenness disease, so Jack is getting jacked legs to match his cranking arm. I'll poke out some little piggies on the ends of his feet and use this fortuitously sized loop tool to stamp some little toenails into them. You know, for realism. Then the leg just needs a quick alcohol brushing and it's done. For this project, I'm going to need a bunch of different colors, washes, varnishes, some brushes, as well as these fun sponges I found in my wife's bathroom drawer. But before all that, cover everything in white gesso. After gessoing, I start by covering everything in their respective base colors. I'll spare you having to watch the footage, but rest assured, most of these took quite the number of coats to look somewhat tolerable. Okay, where was I? The game model box has this fun paint pattern with a yellow circle in the middle. I dug an old bottle of red latex color out from my old, hey, maybe I want to become a makeup effects artist cabinet, which had the perfect circumference for the task. I painstakingly tried to paint within the lines with purple, before wildly overestimating my own freehand skills, trying to fill the interior with yellow, as well as add the purple edge lines and red grid pattern. Step 2 is to bathe it all in washes for shading. The skin gets washed in Reichland Flesh Shade, then dabbing some of it off using a makeup sponge. On the arm, I tried to follow it up with a lighter dry brush, which I ended up not really liking the look of, just too much of a dusty, frosted appearance, which I end up going back to fix here in a minute. The legs also got the Reichland treatment, as did the skull parts. On the skull though, I added quite a bit more, as well as sponged some of it on to get almost a dried blood type of look. In this case, I actually did like the dry brush after, as I was using it almost more as a new layer on top of the messy wash to bring that back a bit, as well as some extra dimensionality and contrast. Now, I've been watching quite a few videos on how to not be a trash painter, and while I still am, at least the result was miles better than my lazy dry brush attempt. So maybe if I do this a couple thousand more times, I might get halfway decent at it. My approach to the spine, that is definitely not a penis, is somewhat different. I wanted more of a multi-layered breakup with different meaty tones, so I'm sponging on thin watered down layers of different shades of purples, reds and pinks in a semi-random pattern. I then lightly highlight some parts using an even lighter pink color to show some of the surface detail, but I don't think it was really necessary as the varnish that is soon to be added took care of most of that. The box torso is way too clean, so I dirtied it up using a reddish brown wash. So the game model has this semi-glossy look to it, which I tried achieving using this semi-gloss varnish, though I don't think it really worked that well in the end. And here comes the aforementioned gloss varnish for the brainstem. I'm really slathering it on. If it gets thicker in some areas than others, then that's great. That will hopefully make it look more like it's covered in this wet, slimy layer of something gross. Lastly, the box gets another little detail through the addition of a very quick edge wear. Edge wear is like perfect detailing for people like me who are lazy and, you know, not good painters. For the base, I wanted to make a section of the mansion floor on planet Rend, which is where Jack is usually to be found. I've just glued a bunch of paint stirring sticks together and primed it with white gesso. To make the checker pattern, I've used masking tape and math to stencil out the white squares so I can easily add black paint to the rest. Now I'm guessing that demonic jesters, shotgun-wielding nutcrackers, and ghost girls might not be the best equipped for house cleaning, so I'll add some floor gunk for realism. Now the company docks my pay if I don't bring back all the bodies, so let's make sure we have one spare, just in case. I'm making the player model basically the same way as the rest. A wire and foil skeleton wrapped in clay. I'm definitely going to have to do some post-bake posing to this guy, so I opted for using the sticky gray bubblegum that is cosplay. To at least give it a little detail, I'll use a few clay noodles to make some cloth folds and poke at it randomly with this ball tool. The first hand will be a curled up fist, so to maybe make my life a little easier, I carved it out of a solid ball of cosplay. So at this stage, I did notice that the hand is basically Super Mario huge, but I really didn't want to make another, so... And you know what they say about a worker with big hands? No, really, what do they say? Please tell me in the comments. The other hand will have its fingers spread out, so after a brief moment of forgetting how many fingers you have, I cut, squeeze and poke it into a hand-like shape before using a rubber tip tool to make little folds in the glove and help with the posing. The helmet luckily has a pretty straightforward design, starting with just a cylindrical pill shape. I carved out the visor using a thin loop tool. I like using Sculpting for this as opposed to the cosplay, just because it's a bit firmer and not as tacky, which works well for more detailed hard surface parts. Because the air quality in outer space is like super bad, the helmet comes equipped with these two mask filters. I poke out some divots using a small ball stylus tool before gluing the filter bits in place using a drop of bacon bond. The helmet also has air tank inlets on the sides, which make the filters make little sense, but I'm not a space doctor, so what do I know? I then drilled a neck hole in the bottom of the helmet, baked it, and shoved it onto the neck stump. I'm trying to pose the head so that it's at least kind of looking towards where Jack's skull is going to be. I'll finish it off by adding trims, a belt, a couple of air tanks, and cross straps to keep it all in place, before popping it all in the oven for a good bake. In the oven, I also added a couple of cosplay noodles for air hoses, which I can pose and glue in place afterwards. The paint job for the player character was pretty basic. Everything got base coated in either gesso or black paint. The suit was painted in several coats of orange. Now I know the original visor is kind of a silver color, but I chose a copperish color because it's cooler. and you're not my real dad. And finally, everything got a dry brush highlighting using a lighter version of their respective base color. It's now the time where we get to put everything together and see if anything actually fits, or if we just end the video here and I go delete my channel. The arm and crank combo is just glued directly into the holes in the box. The fit is already pretty snug, so it doesn't take much to make it stick in there. Now the skull, since it's both heavy and not super solid or straightforward when it comes to the attachment points, I ended up doing a few rounds of squeezing superglue and UV resin into any little gap that made sense to hopefully make it stick. Attaching it all to the base was also a point of anxiety. At least I got to finally try the drill part of the Dremel. Now I just need to glue on the last couple of bits and... oh, god damn it. Okay, looks like we still have a bit to go on our quota before we can leave. Let's see here. Wow, neat, a present. I'll give that to Jack. What's this? Some kind of cute little mask? I wonder what this... Alright, we are back. It's totally still just me, normal and definitely not possessed. So let's just run the beauty shots, get back to corporate HQ and kill everyone there. I mean, get paid or whatever. Huge thanks to everyone still watching. I hope you enjoyed this project. Which brings me to this. I have a giant list of these nerdy projects that I want to do going forward. However, I would also love to hear what you guys are interested in. Do you have any favorite franchises you would like to see turn into a poorly duct taped together project in a future video? Now, I can't promise I'll do them all, but if there's something that a lot of you guys want that also happens to overlap with something already on my list, then that would definitely affect what projects I end up prioritizing. Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this one, maybe consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really does make a huge difference. I'll see you again soon. Ish.